Hello, and thanks for watching another episode of ARFCOM News, your twice-weekly dose of the finest 2A propaganda. Now, I'm not much of a sports ball enjoyer, and I've never seen Kazam, but I always kind of liked Shaquille O'Neal. He just seems like a genuinely decent person. Unfortunately, Shaq has been listening to Control Freaks, and he'll be sponsoring a so-called buyback event in Dallas tomorrow. As you are aware, the state cannot buy back property which never belonged to it in the first place, but these events do function as a convenient way for criminals to dispose of evidence and for control freaks to keep banging that guns are bad drum.
Hey, you can't just hit a drum, you have to beat the shit out of it. Kick it out, you drum!
The Dallas County Sheriff's PIO wouldn't answer my calls, and no one else at the department seemed to be able to tell me how I could locate a flyer for the event, so we can't say for sure what the rules are, but judging from past events, you can fully expect them to just change the rules as they go anyway. Local news-ish sites are saying you can get a $100 gift card for a pistol or a $125 card for long guns, but there is a limit of 3 guns per person. So if you have a 3D squirter, you can get a nice return for a few cents worth of PLA. If not, you'll have to invest a bit more of your own time in making a few black pipe shotguns. But $125 in exchange for maybe $30 worth of plumbing supplies or even actual trash is a pretty decent return on investment. Just be sure to get there early because Donut and Brandon didn't have great success at the last one. Cars were lined up around the block and the organizers ran out of gift cards quite early. And remember, it would be impossible for us to produce quality 2A propaganda without sponsors. So let's pay some bills. Today's video is sponsored by Hydra. From the genius that created the Bushmaster firearm comes the Hydra Mark 15, the ultimate weapon platform. Modular, versatile, and mission-driven, the Hydra Mark 15 quick and easy caliber changes give you a whole lot of options without costing a whole lot of money. And of course by TNVC.com, your source for bespoke, artisanal, non-GMO night vision products, expertly forged by Amish craftsmen in the heart of a dying star. Sheriff deputies in Harris County, Texas shot a woman in her own apartment, apparently because she simply had a gun. Now, I have to apologize up front because I'm piecing this together from a confusing and poorly written article. But the way I'm reading this, it sounds like the deputies responded to a robbery call at some apartments on Uvalde Road at about 2 a.m. And when they were leaving, a resident flagged them down and reported a burglary at a different apartment. As they approached the apartment, they noticed a window near the front door was broken and the blinds were raised, so they knocked on the door and announced themselves as sheriff's deputies. Then they saw an armed woman approaching the door, so they started shooting. Now, this report could be missing some important details, and it's possible they shouted commands, withdrew, or took other steps to avoid shooting, but the way it's written here, it certainly sounds as though they just started blasting at the sight of a gun. Now, it turns out the woman they shot was in her own home, and she had broken the window herself. She is in stable condition, last I knew. I really want to see the body cam for this one, but if it turns out they did just start blasting when they saw a gun, I have to say that is unacceptable. If police can shoot you in your own home for simply having a firearm, we don't have gun rights. Rookie police officers need to be taught that people own guns. It is our right. And the presence of a gun is not on its own justification to use a gun. It is rational to answer a door with a firearm, especially in the wee hours of the morning. It is not rational to believe the men outside in the dark wearing dark clothing and claiming to be cops simply because they say so. The woman should not have approached the door, though. She really ought to have taken a covered and concealed position further back inside her apartment where she could shoot anyone coming through the door, and she should have called 911 to verify the deputies were who they say they were. But she isn't the one who showed up to their home, and she isn't the one entrusted with the awesome responsibility of enforcing the will of the state. What do you folks think? What, if anything, could the deputies have done to avoid having to shoot someone in her own home? Or do you think this was a good shoot? Peter Forcelli, the retired ATF Deputy Assistant Director who exposed the first Fast and Furious scheme, says the U.S. Attorney's Office in Arizona is refusing to prosecute straw purchase arrests. As you know, a straw purchase is when someone buys a gun for someone who isn't allowed to have one. They're relatively easy to prosecute since they leave behind a signed federal document and often video evidence from the gun store. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Arizona is run by Gary Restaino. If that name is ringing a bell, it's because he's the dude Stranger Danger appointed to run the AFT while he was trying to push through his nomination for permanent AFT director. Forcelli says the Attorney's Office never declined to prosecute cases in writing. Rather, they would do it verbally so they could always deny it later. Sometimes they would just let the case files sit and literally collect dust. In one case, he said the blue binder containing a case file sat on an assistant U.S. attorney's windowsill for more than a year until it was bleached white in the Phoenix sun. Is this a soft reboot of Fast and Furious? It's hard not to see it that way. Straw sales represent an easy way for a lot of crooks to get guns, though. Here's a spicy take, though. Why are we letting people out of prison who can't be trusted with a gun? They sound dangerous. Should they be trusted with chainsaws and stabby things? Pool chemicals?
You sure about that? That's why?
The ATF had to argue against the Republic of Californistan to defend against the state's lawsuit alleging the Fed boys don't fed hard enough on homemade firearms. Back in 2020, California and a bunch of Karens sued the ATF demanding they issue rules about 80% receivers. F-Troop happily complied, but that wasn't good enough for Mecha Karen. They think the ATF should declare any vaguely gun-shaped lump of metal to be considered a firearm and be required to transfer through a dealer. That's obviously preposterous, and the ATF requested the court dismiss the Karens summarily, arguing they have no evidence of whether the type of products which are the subject of this disagreement are responsible for any of the meaningful injuries. ATF lawyers had to argue that 80% receivers should be perfectly legal. They said, to function as a receiver, you have to have a cavity to put this in. It's clearly not designed to function. They even said, out loud, that government agencies must prioritize clarity in their regulations.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Take a moment to let all that sink in. Not only did the ATF argue against control freaks in court, they made numerous arguments supporting the legality of 80% receivers and home-built firearms.
Sounds stupid, doesn't it? It works.
Statements which will inevitably be used against them in other cases. This is the weirdest timeline. It all started going sideways with Harambe. If someone can just give Dr. Freeman a crowbar and get him to Geneva, he can shut down the LHC and close the portal to the Hitlerverse. And as long as that portal stays open, we're going to continue seeing pants-on-head stupid rulings coming out of the more authoritarian states like Hawaii. The Hawaii Supreme Court just issued one of the most insane rulings ever seen. Article 1, Section 17 of the Hawaii Constitution states, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
That sounds so familiar.
Sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it? But the court said they read those words differently than the current United States Supreme Court. And they go on to claim there is no state constitutional right to carry a firearm in public.
We don't do that here.
Where do I start? Okay, yes, there is a plainly worded guarantee of the right to bear arms right there in your state constitution. Any idiot can read it and reach the conclusion that the people have the right to bear arms because that's, what it says. And higher courts have explained it for you at great length, more than once. Because, as you mentioned, those exact same words exist in the U.S. Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land. By rejecting Bruin, Heller, and McDonald, you are claiming the state of Hawaii has sovereignty over the federal government, and that's just not how things work. But they didn't stop there. No, they went on to cite the TV show The Wire to argue against the history, text, and tradition standard of review imposed by the Bruin precedent.
This was the old days?
Yeah, now, well, the thing about the old days, they the old days.
So profound. But then, after arguing they don't actually have to look to the text, history, and tradition as directed by the United States Supreme Court, they go on to cite a history of arms restrictions of the Kingdom of Hawaii because a literal king banned the possession of any weapons punishable by public beatings. This ruling reads like a fifth grader wrote it. I refuse to believe these justices are actually that stupid. Every idiot knows that the Hawaii Supreme Court is subordinate to the US Supreme Court. That means they're doing this on purpose. It means they fully know what the outcome should have been, but they have decided to reject the rule of law and delegitimize their own court just to prop up illegal authoritarian restrictions. This is what a civilization in decline looks like. So, what's next? Well, it's hard to say. It could be nothing until these cases work their way through the federal court system. Could be SCOTUS steps in and smacks these Hawaiian judges spam in the dirt, just like they did to Massachusetts in the Caetano stun gun case. And frankly, it would not reflect well on the Supremes to allow a state to brazenly flaunt their authority. What do you think? Will the Supremes take this up? And now for your moment of Zen. Hey friends, do you like pews and other pew-related things? Do you want to help us keep delivering you pure and good American pew-propaganda at the low price of $3.99? We literally couldn't pay the bills without our sponsors, so do us a solid and get yourself something nice from them. You deserve it. I love you.